2 Timothy 1:7 says that God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and sound mind. Or depending on what translation you're looking at, sometimes it says self-discipline. Other translations say self-control. You know, this scripture is one of those scriptures that many people memorize. And whenever we're afraid, we quote this scripture. But there's a lot of deep meaning in this scripture. Now, first of all, you know, God has not given us a spirit of fear. That's also timidity, reticence. God has given us His Spirit, which is the opposite of fear. What's the opposite of fear? Well, then he breaks it down into 3 things. But those 3 things tell us so much about the Spirit of God and about who we are when the Spirit of God comes and lives inside of us. The first one, power. That comes from the Greek word dunamis, which we also get the word dynamite from. And it means the ability to perform, the ability to execute, the ability to do something. When we think of the word strength, you have the strength to do what's necessary. Dunamis, it's the power to do what you're supposed to do. And then the second word is agape. And in the Greek, they had different words for love. And in our culture, many times when we refer to love, we're actually referring to what the Greeks would have considered one of the basest forms of love. And that word is eros, where we get the word erotic from. It's sexual arousal. That word was base. The highest form of love is agape. And agape can be translated as God's preference. God's preference for you, God's preference for the people around you, God's preferences operating through you. We have godlike power, we have godlike preferences, and then that last one, actually, I had to really think about a lot in my life, because when I would see some translations, they would say self-discipline or self-control. When I saw self-discipline, I just thought of works, really. Work harder, just do it. Go harder, go after this thing, make this happen. And unfortunately, that ties into what we refer to as dead works. Because we think that if we do everything right, that we're going to achieve the greatness of God, that we're going to achieve God's love, that we're going to earn something. And that's not the case. And so it was easier for me to look at the translations that said sound mind. But I didn't really understand what in the world that meant. It just seemed like you were even, right? You were balanced. Well, as you look at the Greek word comes from sophronismos. And the first part is so. It comes from sozo, which means healed, whole. And then the rest of that word is also where we get the word diaphragm from, that middle area right here. And it meant your innermost being. It could also be referring to your soul, your mind, will, and emotions, the deepest place, the inner person, from which spring everything else in life. All of our actions and everything we do, it comes from that inner person. And when the Spirit of God comes into you, the Spirit of God creates a new inner person that is godlike. It's really hard. I can understand why it was difficult to come up with a word to translate that, because it is sound mind, it is self-discipline, it is self-control, but those things are just the fruit of what's going on inside of you. The healed inner being, the healed inner person that the Spirit of God creates inside of you. And so when I think about that, actually, I prefer to think about it like programming, like a computer, like a robot. So a robot, you punch in your programming, and then it does according to what it's been programmed to do, right? If it doesn't do something right, it's a programming issue. Whatever it does is a programming issue. Everything that it performs comes out of the programming. And we are the same way. That inner person inside of us is the programming that produces all the fruit, all the actions, everything in our lives. It comes out of that inner person. So when we look at these words, we see that the Spirit of God did not come like the spirit of this world. The spirit of this world is fear, timidity, reticence. But instead, we've been given the Spirit of God. And the Spirit of God comes into us and radically changes everything about us, casting out the spirit of this world, and instead giving us a spirit of godlike power, godlike preferences, and godlike programming. And from that place, everything else in our life comes. So what I want to encourage you to do today is, before you do anything, focus on the new spirit that is inside of you, the God spirit that is inside of you, that has empowered you with God-like power to perform everything that you've been created to do today, with God-like preferences to prefer the things of God, and with God-like programming in your innermost place, so that your life, your lifestyle, comes out of God-like programming.